What are for you the main regulatory challenges for Islamic finance?
Okay, the big one, which I think affects every regulator in Islamic finance, is how does it want to deal with the claim to be Islamic? Is it going to regulate it fully, for example, by setting up a Sharia council and overseeing all the decisions on whether something is Islamic? And that's the approach people like Malaysia or Sudan take. Is it going to say, this is something religious, we can't deal with it at all? And a number of Western regulators would take that view. I think the US SEC would. Is it going to take some position in between? For example, we've taken the view that we want that claim to be soundly based. We want the firm to have a proper Sharia supervisory board. We want it to have systems and controls to implement the decisions of that board. But we're not going to say what those decisions have to be. I'm not sure there's a single answer for this that will work around the globe, but I think those are some of the key issues you have to discuss. Now, there's a few more as well. For example, how do you deal with the separate structures of Islamic finance? They have things called profit-sharing investment accounts that are somewhere between being a conventional deposit and being a normal investment where the investor bears all the risks. How are those going to be regulated? How much capital does a bank have to hold against those? What disclosures does it have to make to its customers about the risks they may be running? And there's a whole set of decisions that come from those separate structures. In a few places, depending on what the interest is, if it's in capital markets products, there may be tax questions because some of the key Islamic products, the sukuk, are often based on transferring assets to a special purpose vehicle and then transferring them back again. And one of the things you need to do is to ensure that doesn't incur tax twice. So those are a few. I can keep going if you want.
Thank you very much. We have a second question. Can a truly global approach to Islamic finance law help that process?
It probably could, but I think it's going to be very difficult to attain. There have been attempts to produce standards for Islamic finance. Indeed, there are two main organizations which are trying to do that, one in the area of Sharia and accounting standards, and the other broadly in prudential and disclosure standards. But the difficulty has been persuading jurisdictions actually to adopt the standards. And at the moment, most regulators have got a huge burden of regulation coming internationally. For example, the Basel III Accords, for example, regulation of derivatives trading, that they are having to implement. For most of them, unfortunately, Islamic finance standards are not high on their agenda. I think it's going to be a while before we actually get global standards implemented around the world.
Thank you very much. And one last question. In your opinion, how successful will Islamic finance be in the West in the coming years?
In the West, I think there will be successes in capital markets because there is an obvious attraction for Western firms in trying to tap Muslim wealth, particularly petrodollars. And it's relatively straightforward to create capital markets products, whether they're sukuk or funds, which will do that. I think there's a much bigger question over Islamic banking and Islamic insurance. And this has partly to do with whether the firms providing those can get distribution to what are relatively dispersed Muslim minorities. And indeed, I think there is also a question how much importance those minorities attach to Islamic finance. Are they really prepared to pay an extra point or two on the profit rate, for example, to have a Sharia compliant mortgage as opposed to a conventional one? Those questions are still to be answered, I believe.
Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Casey.
You're very welcome.